All right, so I'm going to call this special planning meeting order. The intent was to bring Mr. Snyder here to give us some insight. There's been talk about the renovations or build as new work to be coming up for now. Wanted to make sure that we had as much opportunity to get as many voices into it, to have as many people understand the process and do it as effectively can. Since there are so many different people, can we just go around the room and just say who we are, including the people in the back?
Oh, Dr. Perez Palmer.
Phil Piazza, I'm the Assistant Superintendent for 712.
Brian Snyder.
Richard Jones, Stratford Board of Ed.
Katie Burke, Principal of Benelli High School.
Chris Koch, Assistant Principal of Benelli High School.
Brian Massler, custodian at Benelli High School.
Mike Henrik, Board Chair.
Jack Delapiano, Principal of Stratford High School.
Councilman O'Neill, Chairman of Building Needs.
Rich Fredette.
Jill D'Angelo Powers, Board Member and Planning Member.
Peter Carroll.
Alan Llewellyn, current Town Councilman, Building Needs Committee, and Board of Ed Planning.
Lisa Carroll Fabian, Board of Education member. Kristen Bedell, Board of Education.
And we have Teresa and Lou here, stalwart behind the scenes folks. So I asked Brian to come to kind of do a presentation. You can see there's a wide variety of people. We have school officials, we have council members. I'd asked Brian just to kind of give us a presentation, how the whole process works, the feasibility study, you know, when and how we get our input. And so he'll go through, I think he's done a PowerPoint, and then we'll do question and answer and just kind of an open communication, open discussion.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me, Mike. As Mike said, he asked me to just give you a flyover of the process, to get everybody up to speed, and have an opportunity to answer some questions regarding the grant application process, the feasibility study process, what it looks like, rough framework for schedules. So I was just going to talk, but I quickly threw this into a PowerPoint. Everybody likes images. Basically, the grant application process is building a case to the state of Connecticut saying we deserve money from you guys, or at least reimbursement to execute this project. So this whole process over the next year to do a feasibility study and to fill out the grant application paperwork is you're building a case, you're including evidence that's pleading to them, please reimburse, provide grant funding for our project. The essence of the case, and they're typically the same for an existing building, is you have an aging physical plant that's past its useful life, building elements that are not code compliant, spaces and features that were designed either in the 1990 renovation or originally prior to that no longer meet the needs of a 2025, 2026 educational program. So those are sort of your problems that you're trying to communicate to the state. The primary documents that you will include with the grant application process, number one is the educational specification. Probably a lot of you in this room have assisted with an ed spec of some kind, whether it was reviewing one for a small alteration in your building or replacing flooring or asbestos abatement. It is like the guiding principles document for your renovation. The other document that's going to come out of the end of this process is a cost estimate, which is going to be the basis for what you're going to go, well, first, what the town's going to approve and fund. Second, what you're going to put on a grant application and tell the state our project's going to cost, and I'm afraid to throw out a number because it doesn't mean anything. I'm going to say $50 million, and they're going to give you your reimbursement rate based on that. And the other big thing that has to be included in those grant application documents is you have to provide proof of funding. So the project has to be funded and approved by town council and all the authorities before you even submit the grant application. So this is the basis of where we're going. The ed spec, as I said before, that is the guidebook for the project. I've included some descriptions up here. In a nutshell, the ed spec is going to include the entire essence of what the project is. What spaces you're looking to create, what systems you're looking to include. It is going to cover the details as how it's going to be built, what is the construction going to look like. And at the end of the ed spec, let's say we're going to hire an architectural firm to help us with a feasibility study. They're going to help with the ed spec. Everyone's going to have buy-in with the ed spec. It's going to be this descriptive document of the project. An ed spec should be able to stand on its own. If you say, you know what, we don't want to work with this next architectural firm, they're out the door. But you still, at the end of it, you're going to have a document that hopefully can stand on its own, that if we say we want to hire, instead of ABC firm, we want to hire XYZ firm, they can pick up the ed spec and with some getting oriented to the project, be able to pick up if you want to change gears going into construction documents and specifications. That's how detailed the ed spec needs to be. The other document that I mentioned is a cost estimate. As I said, that is the basis for, there is going to be a number that's going to ultimately be submitted to the state. They're going to say, yes, we will give you whatever your reimbursement rate is now, 59, 60, 61. Am I close with your reimbursement rates? Somebody has a, it's around 60%.
64,
Yeah, it's around 60%.
64.
Exactly. The number that comes out of this cost estimate, if the state approves it, that's going to be the number that they're going to reimburse the 60% for.
And how are those, that cost estimate, how is that produced? Is it just based on a square footage? Is it an actual detailed?
They want to see more than a square foot estimate. They want to see some nuts and bolts.
Okay.
So in order to get some nuts and bolts, and this is later on in the presentation, you have to get a semblance of a schematic design.
Mhm.
You don't have to have, 40 sheets of drawings, but if you're going to be affecting spaces and sort of gutting an entire wing and changing it from classrooms to a science wing, you kind of have to know what you're doing so that a cost estimator can attribute dollars to that type of renovation.
So the feasibility study who's hired, they would also be doing some of the design work?
Correct. At the end of the feasibility study, all of these documents are going to be completed, ed spec, cost estimate, but in order to do the cost estimate, you got to have something of a design, even if it's schematic, with some square footages to it.
So typically, when you're hiring the person to do the feasibility study, does it make sense to maybe include in that scope of work that design? I know you said you don't have to keep that person, but this person's already done the design work. Would you kind of be looking for feasibility / design? Or?
Yes. Ideally, we're going to scrutinize, and I'm not sure who's going to be the deciding authorities. I'm sure the mayor is going to have a voice. Some people in this room are going to have a voice, who that architect is. And if all goes well, ideally, we would get our grant approval and we would pick up with the same firm, assuming we come to an agreement and we're off to the races. But the feasibility study is a standalone entity with a standalone fee, and you can part ways at the end of it if you so choose. But ideally, we would pick somebody that we would like to continue working with.
Yeah, because you need a detailed cost estimate, they have to do some detailed design work, and you would think you would want.
Right,
You would want
but-
to make that selection.
Right,
at the beginning of the process.
but the drawing development after the end of the feasibility, that's 98% of the drawing. They're going to do one step above single line drawings during schematic design, just to figure out what spaces are we gutting? Are we going to tear down a wing? Are we going to build a wing? I'm just making stuff up. I'm not saying that we're going to build any new construction, but you have to figure out, are you building new? Are you tearing down? Or all the spaces staying the same and you're just renovating and doing an energy efficient building envelope with new systems? You have to vet out a good percentage of those decisions during the feasibility phase to come up with an estimate. And the estimate doesn't mean, in that ed spec, doesn't mean that you can't make turns along the way, but once the state says that they're gonna give you 60% on $50 million, those numbers start to get really tight the further in. As soon as they give their approval, to change it is a big process. So that's why we have to know what this thing's gonna look like at the end of the feasibility study phase. Pretty close, 80, 90%, and you can, there can be audibles along the way as you learn more about the project and you get into the details.
So I have a question. So the architect will be selected, it's gonna be on the application, will be selected prior to them being put on the application, the grant application?
This is just the feasibility study. This next phase is doing a feasibility study. So at the end of the feasibility study, we have deliverables, we have a grant application, we have an ed spec, estimates, we have funding that the town has approved, and we're submitting to the state for them to do their thing, which takes a year, which Jack knows. Once everything's submitted, you sort of stand back and you wait, because it has to get approved by legislature, it goes to the governor's desk, so that whole process takes a year.
So you don't have to have the architect selected at that time?
No.
Okay.
I would think, and I laid out a loose timeline, and I'll get to that, don't let me forget. But yeah, I laid out a loose timeline as to what this could look like. This is actually pretty good timing, talking about this right now. The third piece of documentation that there's a lot of documentation to get sent up with the grant application, but I'm giving you the big ones. Proof of funding. And what that looks like is a pitch is made to town council, what the dollar amount is based on the estimates and the approved design. Town council has to approve it. It has to officially go into the minutes that they've approved it, that they're gonna seek bond funds to fund this project. And those meeting minutes get included in the grant application to the state. So that's just one of the outcomes.
Brian, real quick, that bond funding is for the full amount. That's not for
Correct.
60%.
The town school district, they have to fund 100% of the project initially, and then as you get into the project, you can file payment applications for reimbursement as progress payments.
And then as you saw with Stratford High, once you're under construction, this funding basically functions very similar to a mortgage. Initially, the town is laying out all the money, and then the state is reimbursing us the 60% as we go along.
Right.
It's important that that gets understood, because if you're following and watching cash flow, the first 6 payments, it looks a little off, but that's what's going on. The town's literally paying like 90 to 100%, and then submitting to Hartford immediately, and then collecting reimbursements while we're under construction. Thank you.
Sure. So what I laid out in the first few slides is where we're going to get to a grant application submitted to the state. How we get there is through a feasibility study. It's a study conducted by a qualified architectural firm, and this architectural firm is going to be the one that's going to work with stakeholders on this side to create the ed spec that I talked about, the cost estimate, and the grant application documents. The feasibility study process. Assess existing conditions. I did to find out what we have there now. I did an existing conditions study in 2022. I'm sure that document is going to be useful to whoever who does the feasibility study as a starting point to assess the existing building systems, building envelope, windows, roofs, floors, MEP, controls, etc.
And there are copies of it on the table over here, so if you don't have one or want to grab one on the way out.
Part of that process is identifying stakeholders and having interviews with stakeholders. It could be in-person interviews, it could be questionnaires, it could be some combination of both. Stakeholders would be obviously the principal and administrators, department heads, select teachers, custodians, students, and oftentimes first responders to address security and safety concerns in the midst of this process. As the project gets going, there needs to be a small committee, a focus committee, and a chair that's going to be the voice for all the stakeholders, because who you guys hire or the town hires, they can't be communicating and getting emails and phone calls and texts from teachers and department heads and everybody else, or it's just going to be a mess. So at some point, there needs to be a focus group that's going to distill the information, break it down into bullet points that will be communicated to the design team to be incorporated into the ed specs and the ultimate design. Also part of the feasibility process is assessing existing and future demographics. What's the population trends? Is the school going to be growing? Is it going to be shrinking? Is it staying the same?
And that piece of it, we just redistricted, and we hired SLAM to do all those, so I don't know how current it is, but we do have that information.
Right.
So.
I believe when you submit for a grant application, your demographic studies have to be within a certain number of years. I don't know that number off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but it may be valid.
We did last year.
Okay, so my guess is 2 or 3 years is probably good, but
Yeah.
Again, develop the ed spec. Once you have develop a space program, find out are you short on science labs, and we have to convert existing resource rooms or classrooms to science lab, etc. They're going to create a space program that at the end of the day, they're going to design to. And once the space program and the ed spec are done, they're going to put pencil to paper and start developing floor plans as to what this renovation would look like. Once everyone's on board with the final design, they're going to start developing cost estimates. Are we 50 million? Are we 100 million? We're going to get into a ballpark, and that's where a lot of people are going to be weighing in, including politicians, as to what's the appetite for spending in this place versus the needs. And then at the end of it all, complete the grant application documents and submit a grant application to the state.
And I think Katie has got a running list of some of the needs and some of the desires of the school. I know
I'm sure she does.
She's given us and has been asked by us to have that so we can.
Yeah, and all that's going to be precious information. So rough schedule. June 30th up at the state for these priority grant applications is a magic date. They accept these.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. That's the date that, as we're looking ahead, we're in July, we got almost a year. I would think if we start the process now, getting an architect on board and begin this process of assessing needs, developing this study, I don't see why we can't have a grant application before the June 30th, 2026 deadline. And I think everybody that's going to participate in this process should have that date burned into their brains. Even if we spend a couple months interviewing, assessing architectural firms, and we have somebody on board September, October, that's going to give them around 8 months to develop the feasibility study and the grant application documentation and meeting all the town, the building needs committee, the town council meeting dates, getting all those in sequence. I think we have to move, we don't have to act recklessly, but I think it's an adequate schedule. You know, if we back up a couple months from that June 30th deadline to be able to get the approvals that we need from building needs, town council, and all the committees to make a submission for June 30th. Because if you miss that window, guess what? You're looking at June 30th, 2027 is your grant application submission deadline, which you lose a whole nother year. Yes?
Yeah, so in our building needs committee meeting on Monday, We already discussed, you know, the fact that, you know, you guys are gonna have these meeting, you know, with the students and everybody, but we're gonna, you know, pick, you know, one person to represent each group, you know, and form a, you know, subcommittee, you know, with building needs and stuff, and we're gonna, at our next council meeting, you know, hope to have those names, you know, so we'll be reaching out to Mike, and, you know, Mike already given your name and stuff like that, so we'll be, you know, right in line, you know, ready to move forward, you know, in September.
Okay, so,
Can I ask you a
sure.
question? Is this already passed the Building Needs Committee in the council?
No, we talked in our building needs committee and stuff, you know, we.
Okay, so it hasn't passed the Building Needs Committee?
Yes, they passed.
The committee hasn't been created yet.
Yeah,
No, I'm talking about right now in the council, has the Building Needs Committee passed this?
Passed what?
This project?
yeah.
Because it's gotta go to town council for final approval, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
is this
we're in the
approved?
process, right now. What we did, we put them on the agenda, this project on the agenda for a feasibility study, right? But we had to make sure.
So
that it was funded.
just a simple question, so they hasn't passed the Building Needs Committee yet then?
The only thing that's been done to date is the town funded the feasibility study. So
Okay, so
we're
we're
literally at square one.
Yeah,
They funded a feasibility study.
Feasibility study
This
was-
is the beginning of the beginning.
It was, the feasibility study was funded last year.
Right.
Yeah. And then typically it takes until December until they finalize the bonding and whatever it is, so.
Okay, so because I know it's a step, it's Building Needs Committee and the town council, I just want to know where we are, are we anywhere near that yet or not?
No, we're way at the beginning.
Okay, so it hasn't passed it.
But I'm saying
No.
Okay.
we gotta. form
This is
committee.
conceptual, pre-conceptual. This is just the beginning.
So just while we're into the disrupting your presentation.
It's fine.
Well,
The architect, higher architect, you got October 2025. For a governmental agency, is that a reasonable time frame, or is that like, you guys better get on your ponies and get riding, we need this done?
If we can get some proposals and get people to weigh in, there's no reason it can't go quickly. I know the mayor's motivated to move it, so if
But that's-
she's motivated, I need to be motivated to do what I need to do to help.
Time frame wise, to hire in October, we would have to go through purchasing August and September. Because this has to kind of go out for a solicitation and a bid and go through the town purchasing department.
Right,
Because we're talking about bringing in an outside consultant.
right.
Okay.
And the specs for the higher architect piece, is that something you can put together outside of a committee, is that?
I can certainly help. I'm sure we don't have to look too long to find a school district in the state that's done the exact same thing for RFQ, for a high school renovation, and then you just edit it, customize it from there.
Because I mean, if we've got to go to a committee and then take a vote and try to draft the language, which I'm sure you could do because you've probably done a million of these things. But then once the hiring comes in, that would come back to the committee. But just to expedite it, just getting it out there, I think would come better from you.
Right.
And just to answer Mr. Carroll's question, so what's gonna happen, and we plan on having this coming before the council in August. All right, building needs meets the first Monday, so we'll discuss that and send these names and stuff to the council in the following week in August and stuff for their approval.
Okay, so the first week you'll approve it, then it goes to council, they have to approve it.
Just the committee.
Just committee, I
Right.
understand.
Does it have to pass the board first?
No.
Board of Education, money you don't have to pass the board?
Board of
Uh,
Education has to approve the ed specs.
Okay.
That's another document included in the package. So yes, the Board of Ed is going to be involved.
Of course.
They had, if it says new science labs or 5 new classrooms, the Board of Ed has to sign the ed buy-in and approve the ed specs.
So I did talk to Alvin. Alvin asked me for names. I did talk to you about it, so, being part of that subcommittee, so, you know, anyway, I just wanted it to be as comprehensive as possible, but,
I just was thinking for timeline, if we had to wait for a board meeting, then that would push it back further, so that's why I was asking.
if we need, any board meetings we needed to get done in a timely fashion, I would call special meetings.
And the ed specs will come.
Mike, through you to Alan,
for clarity, is that a aggressive or reasonable timeline to get through purchasing for the hire of this architect by this October proposed line?
No, it's relatively easy. Once they kind of know what the outline of the feasibility study is, they can kind of go out for, request for quotations or request for proposals, and it's a pretty kind of swift-moving process. Ironically, the time-consuming piece is usually where all of us get involved.
We slow down.
And you're not obligated, with professional services, you're not obligated to, it's not like a construction project where you're obligated to take the lowest price unless you can prove that they're not qualified. When it comes to professional services, you have leeway as long as the prices are in a cluster. You can pick who you feel comfortable with because it's a relationship at the end of the day.
And the good part about purchasing too is that that money's already been approved and bonded, so it's sitting, waiting, it just needs to be requested,
So, to the best of my ability, I will see if we can, I think we should try to work to this June 30, 2026 deadline, if it's at all possible. I think it's a little bit aggressive, but I think it's doable. And you can see the other dates here. So you submit, but before June 30th, 2026, all this goes up to the state, and then all of a sudden it gets quiet. But the state has to do their thing. December 15th, the priority lists all these projects. They go to the governor and the education committees. February 1st, they do their thing. It goes to the governor and the General Assembly. And it isn't until spring, summer 2027 that they start really getting into the weeds with these things and issuing approval letters. So you will not get a green light on any grant until spring, most likely summer 2027. And what I would suggest is once we go from June 26 to say June 27, if we hated the architect that we worked with, you guys worked with, we would be looking at new architects to make sure we have somebody when summer 27 comes around, whoever it is, the firm who did the feasibility study, or if we're changing gears, whoever it is, have them lined up. Because once you get that letter, you want to say go, and they're going to start drafting construction documents, doing design development.
So it's 2 years?
It's multi-years, yeah. And even once you start a firm going, and let's say we get our grant approval summer 2027, you're not going to be building anything summer 2028 unless there's like interim moves, because they're not going to have any drawings. Doing design development and construction drawings is going to be a six to 9 or 10 month process for the entire project, which means we're going to lose the next summer unless we can pull out strategic projects for summer 2028 that they can do on an expedited basis that perhaps involve phasing, something that has to be done before the bulk project. But to do everything for a full-blown summer 2020, I don't think that's feasible.
So then you're talking, just so everybody has, so there are no unrealistic expectations, the bulk of this project wouldn't begin until the summer of '29.
Correct. And that's based on this schedule. So if somehow we can't get together to have an application for June 30, 2026, add a year to everything. Yeah, the bumps go in years with these kind of projects. They don't go in weeks and months.
So Brian, just quick as a case in point, if we were to reuse the existing footprint, it wouldn't be impossible to follow this timeline and say do the auditorium summer of 2028.
Yes, like if we had our ducks in a row and even without getting an approved grant, if the town's willing to say, you know something, we really want to do the auditorium, start doing construction documents on the town's dime with the anticipation, yes, this is going to get approved, we're taking a risk, we want to have documents ready so we can utilize that summer.
And does the state allow that once the work's been begun or even completed perhaps, to incorporate that into, or we would already get some approvals if we hit this timeline in 2026.
We
get-
would do it in phases. If the auditorium was a priority, while we're waiting for them to approve the grant, we would say, go out in faith and say, you know what, we think there's a high likelihood this is gonna get approved, the auditorium work's gonna get approved. Hire your architect or continue the relationship with the existing architect to start developing construction documentation, construction documents and specs immediately, so that you get the approval in the summer and then the next step is you submit plans and specifications for approval, and that's a multi-month event with the state. So even if we get an approval in June of '27, and we have a set of drawings done, if I'm hearing correctly, the auditorium may be a priority, get the documents done, and when we apply for our plans and specs approval, we're gonna lay out the phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 1, say, is auditorium. The drawings are done, and we will file in July for a plans and specs approval that hopefully they look at it by Christmas, and then go out to bid and cross our fingers to have it awarded for the summer. Yeah, these things take multi-month steps, which is why it takes so long. So yeah, anything that we could pluck out that the town is willing to pay for in terms of professional services from June 26 to June 27, just so we don't lose the summer. Summers are precious when it comes to these projects. You don't want to lose a summer. So that's something that the architectural firm could talk to us about, depending on the scope of work, finding out what could we possibly pull out that would make sense, that we could advance ahead of time.
So, Brian, am I correct that, so in the outline of this feasibility study, we're going to come up with a prioritization list of what needs to be done, but until you get that authorization in, say, 2027, you're pretty much hoping and praying that the priorities within the state remain the same and that you can get the money back. Would that be correct?
Yeah, they're gonna review your application, and depending on what your reimbursement rate is, they'll say, we're gonna give you 61% reimbursement on a $100 million project. Just making up numbers. And it won't be, even if we follow this schedule, we won't get that approval until spring, summer 27.
Perfect. Got it. Okay.
But once you have that approval letter, you can immediately submit, you have to go back to the state for plans and specifications review and approval. Before, you can't go out to bid until they sign off on it. So the sooner you put a package in front of them for plans and specs approval, after grant approval, the sooner you can get something out on the street for the whole bidding process.
So hypothetically, you can in one hand grab your approval, and then in the other hand, have your bid specs.
Yes, as soon as you get your approval, they're gonna issue you a state approval number with a project number, and you need that number to put on the plans and specs review application. So you get it one day, and if
it's done, you could do it the next day.
If the town says it's okay to advance the drawings and engineering of a couple select projects, you can be drawing ready July 27, and we can, because once you submit it to the state, it's like watching grass grow once you submit stuff to them. Even if you submit in July of 27, you may not hear back from them until Thanksgiving or Christmas before they review it and approve it, and then you're going out to bid in early January. You can do it. You can put the job out to bid in January, have a bid opening, and then get your approvals and get ready for a summer 28 construction. But
so an expedited
the
process,
ducks have to be in a row.
An expedited process. The best case scenario is going to be select pieces that would start the summer of 28.
Yeah, and a good architectural firm, as they're going through and getting input, it's gonna become clear what the obvious low-lying fruit projects are that perhaps they could pull off, that wouldn't be heavy drawings and specs heavy, that they could have ready to bid after a summer 27 grant approval.
So I would think that the Board of Ed would make the determinations in terms of, you know, what projects they deem are the most important, put it in some type of order, and
Katie
then,
can probably tell you right now.
yeah.
Well, and actually, I was gonna ask a question that follows that nicely. Within this timeline, right, where would it be determined what type of renovation we will undergo? Build to new, renovate to new?
Well, it's gonna be a renovate to new, because that's the only way you're gonna qualify for the 60%
Okay, so
reimbursement.
that has already been determined.
Yeah, renovate to
There's no
new.
possibility of, you know, I'm not saying I want this, but bulldozing the school and starting and building a brand new school.
You can, renovate to new can take multiple shapes.
Mhm.
Renovate to new is a definition that basically says you're bringing your entire physical plant up to today's standards.
Yep.
Building codes, finishes, building quality, et cetera. You're bringing it to today's standard. 100% code compliance,
Mhm.
everything renovated. And that could be renovating the existing building and not building one new square foot, or it could be leveling it and that's just plain old new construction, or tearing down half of it. It's-
So Stratford High.
But at the end of the day, you're getting something that's 100% renovated, 100% code compliant.
But what we talked about in our building needs meeting on Monday, right, was in terms of some of the projects and stuff that already was done, you know, and the reimbursables, you know, we got from the state, you know, so you have like your solar system and those type of things that's brand new that was just paid for, you know, so for that reason, you know, I don't think that we're gonna be talking about knocking the building down, you know, so everything, like you said, renovate to new, you know, is what we're thinking about.
But you could still, and this was kind of my open discussion piece, but you could also add on to it, you know,
Yeah,
keep.
yeah, we're not talking
So I
about
guess
that.
that's my question. At what point would we be able to share our feedback with regard to what our needs are? So if the town is saying that, you know what, you just put in, you know, millions of dollars worth of solar panels, we're only going to renovate the existing structure, at what point can we come in and
Yeah, that's the
share?
purpose of this
It's
subcommittee.
this phase number 2.
Okay. In the
And the
subcommittee,
feasibility study, stakeholder interviews, that's where the firm is gonna be sitting with you.
right,
Having people complete questionnaires. Everybody's got a different process for collecting data. But that's the phase, number 2.
Thank you.
and so again, I'll just say this, that's the purpose of the subcommittee that we're creating, you know, so that before everything really goes to building needs, you know, with approval from this subcommittee, because, you know, everything and stuff that the Board of Ed wants, and, you know, like all the players that's gonna be there, you know, and Brian, all you guys, we're gonna, like I said, when we get to this, that's gonna be, you know, everybody's gonna be part of the committee, so the things and stuff that the Board of Ed wants, you know, like I said, you're gonna be meeting with students and everything, so we don't need everybody there, you know, so the select people that's gonna represent those groups will come and share in the committee, and that committee going forward, you know what I'm saying, is, you're gonna have whatever ideas that the Board of Ed wants, you know, and everybody will agree to that. It will be passed on to the Building Needs Committee for approval. So, anything that you don't want, you know what I'm saying, is not gonna be forwarded to the Building Needs Committee. So that committee is gonna be very important in terms of, you know, what happens.
And I will be, Mr. O'Neill had asked for names, so I will be submitting those to him, and hopefully with his indulgence, we'll get, you know, a good variety of folks from the board side on this subcommittee as well.
So who makes the decision, like, okay, we have all these new solar panels on the roof, we don't want to move them now that we've spent all the, like, who makes that decision? Like, we're not gonna renovate this floor, but we're not gonna take the roof off because we put these solar panels on, like, who decides that? Or-
I can't speak for the decision makers at the town and the Board of Ed, but I would think it would be safe to say that with the work that's been completed, you got solar panels, you got a new roof, you got new floors. Try to preserve as much of that as we can. But you may hit a wall and say, oh, we can't do what we want to do and what we should do for the next 10 to 20 years. So maybe we have to tear out a little bit of this. But I can't speak for the decision makers, but my guess is there will be a charge to the firm, try to keep as much as possible. So we're not, throwing money out the window that's already been spent, which makes sense. So you may hit a fork in the road where you have to dismantle something that's been done in the last 10 years. And then at that point, you'll make that decision. Is it worth it to tear out, $100,000 worth of new floors? I don't know, I'm making stuff up, but there's going to be some of those decisions along the way.
We can't work too hard on those floors.
I know.
And I would think our architectural firm or our feasibility folks would give us some insight into the.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a good firm should not be drawing floor plans until they have met with all the stakeholders and given people that have a voice an opportunity to at least complete a questionnaire or provide input to start feeding into the process to develop a space program so that you're getting a school that's set up for the next 20 years at least. 30 if possible, but with the way things change, they change very fast.
Well, we're still dealing with an infrastructure that's over 80 years old, so
Right.
20 years.
We missed a couple of windows.
Exactly.
Can I say something, and I think it's worth kind of bringing up, when you do the feasibility study, and I'm not sure if they're gonna use the enrollment projection study that SLAM did, or you have to do a new one, but they'll look at a 10-year enrollment projection, and then they'll reimburse you on a school based on the number that provides you. So one of the things that the auditorium was brought up, like they told us, you could build Stratford High School for 1,050 kids, and we could have an additional 65 in the Alpha Wing, so 1,115 total. The town looked at redistricting the elementary schools and didn't really progress that out. This was years ago. So if you're gonna do this, based on what the SLAM said, you might be looking at having to build a school that's smaller than Benella is now. And I don't know if that would be in the best interest of the town, right? Because, as we know, Stratford High School's enrollment now is good, it's healthy. So, just keep that in the back of your mind. And I brought up an auditorium today, and Rich, I don't know if you remember this was one of my first days. I'm too bad Rich Fredette wasn't here. I said, why don't we make the gym a little smaller and make the auditorium bigger? And it was, auditorium could only be 50% of the capacity, otherwise the town has to pay 100% over that cost. There's little things to think about when you go through that feasibility study before you submit any numbers, because like you said, once it's approved, it's really hard to go back to get changes for bigger things like that.
Once that number's on that approval letter, the number's really the number. So if you have 10% inflation in a year and you didn't account for it, you've got to design to your original number.
Brian, can you speak to that a little bit, kind of how it's almost like a menu, like you establish your seat count and then there's a percentage of the total project gross, so much for the exterior, so much for finishes, so much for roof, and it kind of, it drives your decision. There's not as much like open choice in all of this as you think, even with regards to types of finishes and what has to go, like in science lab rooms, they kind of dictate what you need to use for material.
Right.
Yeah, then it'll be designed, and then they'll come back and say, your project is gonna cost, if we're gonna use a $100 million round number, you're at $130 million, and they say, well, we have to cut $30 million. So then they come back and they say, we're gonna cut all replacement parts, so they're virtually worthless. Not to mention, you have to change the batteries, I think, every 6 months. And it's about a 30-minute process per door, and that was with me and the assistant principals doing it. But 30 minutes per door, and cost of batteries. 5 different batteries.
But some people in the room, I think, mentioned that those weren't the right locks to use.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I don't know.
Nobody listened. but-
The main thing they do is they can't be unlocked. There's a lot of locks that you can't unlock. So,
Councilman O'Neill,
Yeah.
has there been any conversation or discussion about making Benel larger to accommodate more students?
Again, I think that whatever the Board of Ed decides, you know, that's what we have to go with, you know.
So
it's
that would happen on the board side?
on the board side.
Thank you.
then the only thing to consider, Katie, and I can't wait to work on this if I'm still around, but depending on the timeline for construction is, if it's gonna interfere with your daily operations, and you have kids in the building, we might have to work out a split schedule or something.
I lived through a renovate to new in my former school,
Renovate to-
where every hallway was renovated at a time, and we just shifted the building, and that was my life for about 5 years, so.
great.
You lived through as a
Good.
teacher, hopefully look forward to living through as a principal. You'll be ready for it.
My question is this focus group that Brian discussed and this subcommittee that Chairman O'Neill illustrated, are they one and the same? Is it the same thing, the focus group and the subcommittee that you are creating?
No.
No? Okay.
So the focus group is Board of Ed and school personnel to discuss programmatic needs, and then the building committee is what Alan was the chair of, oversees kind of the building process.
Brian, you mentioned that the timeline is somewhat aggressive. What are some of the, in your experience, what are some of the pitfalls that we can try to avoid and try to make sure we get that June 3rd?
Efficient decision-making is the big one. And that's why if you look at I underlined small committee, a small group that's gonna distill you're gonna be flooded with information. Every teacher's gonna say, well, I want this and I want that, and you guys have to distill that information. And if the decision-making process is streamlined and that information is being fed to the architectural firm to respond quickly, but if you meet twice a month and it's gonna be clunky.
But the streamlined you have to be careful with the streamlined process, that you're not leaving out critical or pertinent
Correct.
information. So sometimes having the right people, you could have a large group of the right people, they can move very quickly. If you have a small group of the wrong people, it's gonna move very slowly.
Exactly.
The size of the group isn't always
Yes.
necessarily the impediment, it's the people.
Has to be efficient.
Now, you have questions up there. Were you at the end of your PowerPoint, or was it?
This is it, we're already doing it.
I know we are, but I didn't know if we skipped
No.
past something or.
No, the slide before this was just the schedule, trying to get a grant approval for 27 if we can make this happen. And that's a whole nother process, assuming we get an approval after that. Then you get into plans and specs approval, construction documents, bidding, contracts, construction, but I capped it at feasibility study grant application.
So what I want to do is get this group together one more time, perhaps the end of July, beginning of August, before before our meeting, and have a discussion with the group, but also submit the names to Mr. O'Neill of the people that we would like to have on the council's. I guess it's a building needs subcommittee?
Yeah.
Building needs subcommittee, so.
Right.
But I just wanted, so our group, I know there are questions where we're going, how we're doing it here, so we as a board side can present some type of so we can hash out all the variations or possibilities, and then also be involved with the council's subcommittee as that moves forward, so.
Yeah, establishing a decision-making process is going to be critical.
Yeah.
This is okay, we have a question, we have a fork in the road. What is the process to arrive at a decision?
Yeah. And I think, the board's been good with that over the last year and a half, of just making those decisions in a timely, for the most part, not all of them, but doing things in a timely fashion, making sure that the public is apprised of the things we're doing and how we're doing it. And again, not getting caught up in the weeds. Obviously, there's some of the issues that take a little longer, but I think we've done a really good job, I mean, like policy and some of our committees, just, and curriculum now, but moving, taking large chunks of things and moving them forward.
Right.
In a timely and efficient and effective manner, so hopefully we can continue that process.
And I think also not to have everybody have a closed mind in terms of if those panels and stuff have to stay there. We're doing a project, and Brian, you might be able to speak to it, but we're doing a project now that the CDBG dollars and stuff paid for a roof, and so if we mess the roof up, then we have to pay the, federal government back those dollars, so as we're going forward and meeting with the architect, we're trying to find ways not to be able to remove the roof, that it can be pieced back together. So I'm just saying that is a possibility, and Brian, you may be able to speak to that, but I'm saying it depends on how the roof was installed, so I don't want you to go away thinking, oh, we can't, so we may be able to do that, but again, in the discussion with, the architect or, who's ever doing the design, those questions and stuff can come up, and like I said, Brian, but around, so I don't know, you may know if
Every decision, it's a case-by-case decision, and I know the one you're referring to. That's messy. That's very messy. But the goal is not to throw stuff out and demolish it when the town spent good money on it. If you come up with a good solution that makes sense, or minimize it.
And I would think, working within the footprint, but then, like Katie was asking, working within the existing footprint, but do we go out, do we, how do we do it? Do we come up with a whole new plan altogether? Whatever it may be, but it's like taking advantage of the good and making what's new make better.
Right. And that's all part of the feasibility study process, is just assessing the needs.
I remember, and I don't know if, I've said it probably 1,000 times, but I used to be on the chairman of Building Needs Committee, and Alvin came to me and said, hey, we got a bunch of problems with Stratford High, so let's look into it. We dug in, did a feasibility study. It was able to start the whole process, but did a feasibility study, realized, like, I know you got steam pipes down there, and I think it was, you had said, or somebody said, that those steam pipes probably need to be replaced, they're leaky. I think it was Dan at your meeting. But so if we're getting rid of the steam pipes and now we're going with ductwork or something, and the roof's there, it may not work or whatever it is, but it was big, and that was Stratford High. There were old steam pipes under the ground. There was asbestos. Half the building was useless.
I think they're still there. It's like a catacomb now.
But half the building was so old that it couldn't be salvaged, and the other half could partially be salvaged, and that's when the decision was made that no, there's nothing salvageable here, so we gotta knock this whole thing down. So, and I don't know if, once you look at Bunnell, there might be pieces and parts of it that draw you to the only logical conclusion that there's nothing salvageable. Even though we have new stuff, parts of this make this unworkable, so. But that feasibility study,
That's where it all gets vetted out.
Yeah. But it was Alvin O'Neill who first made the first complaint, and it was because of him you guys got a new Stratford High.
Any other questions?
So you said the number is the number. Once you submit and you have your number, say there are some ridiculous cost overruns, is there a process where you can ask for more grant money? And
There is, but it's not easy.
Okay.
You probably jump back into the timeline loop.
Yes.
Yes and no.
I mean, you can amend it.
Vicky Soto School got increased and enhanced to hit that floodplain regulation that changed.
Yeah,
And they
there's
went back
a,
for state funding and went back for town funding.
there's
In
a
order to
EDO
meet the total.
49R, the revision, so yes. There is a vehicle to add.
It's not smiled upon though.
No.
It does turn a lot of heads going that alternate route.
But it's good. I don't know how you guys feel about what we've heard today. I mean, I think it's partially a little disappointing, the timeline, but I kind of had that sense all along. But I think this was very informative and is a good starting point. And I think hopefully we're gonna have a whole lot more meetings on this as we enter the process, as we go through the process, and as we, push it to its conclusion. So hopefully it'll be an ongoing communication between the board, the town, Public Works, whoever's the architect. So hopefully the channels of communication will stay open and the information will flow freely as we all work our way through it. Anybody have anything else? Anything else you want to?
I'm good if you guys are.
Katie?
No, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I know Chris and Brian, I don't want to speak for you, but this has been, I'm going into my 11th year here at Bunnell. Chris, how many?
For a little while. 06, 07.
Brian,
I
you're
think
going.
I'm like 13, 14.
All right. So we are all very, very invested in Bunnell High School, and I think that if anything, our kids are so deserving of a new facility that will enhance their learning experiences, provide them with new opportunities. We're talking about, expanding our pathways, the CTE program. It's been a big point of conversation. Mike's done a few walkthroughs this year at Bunnell, and I really appreciate you being so visible in our school. Obviously, members of the board who serve as parents, and councilman who serves as a parent. I just thank you all very, very much for your support. I know that you know how desperately this is needed for our children. And I look forward to future conversations.
All right, well, nothing else. Look for, I guess I'll go with a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Brad, seconded by
Second.
Brian, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion back in. I don't know if we ever called it to order, I think I called it to order.